Hello friends, for today's video we're going to be doing a first impressions for Expedition 33. Jumping straight into it, I am going to break this up into a few different sections, and I wanted to start with combat. This was the area of this game that I was the most unsure about. Obviously the game looked amazing. There was so much to the visuals, the world, the characters that I was instantly intrigued by, but the actual playing of the game, I wasn't sure how this was going to play out, and thus far I am about a little over a third of the way through, so it is a little more than first impressions, but I got pretty hooked onto it. That is in part because of the combat system. I knew that the combat system was going to be turn-based, and as somebody who really does love a lot of the action RPGs that are out there, and I do really enjoy the grind and constant death that is Souls games, it does start to feel like everything is one or the other and that there isn't a lot of variety, and I have wanted a return to turn-based, but I recognize that turn-based can be a little bit boring. If you're not having a good amount of strategy involved, then it starts to just feel like a thing you have to get through. Sometimes the upgrade system can be fun, but the actual partaking of combat to get to the fun upgrades is not that engaging. But Expedition 33 has what is one of my favorite combat systems I've come across. I think the combination of turn-based, as well as there being stakes within the turn-based and the strategy that's involved, and the individualism within each of the characters and how to strategize with just them alone, not to mention how to combine all of what they do together, is near flawless. I absolutely love it. Obviously with turn-based, sometimes you find turn-based systems that are partially timed. Other instances of turn-based, you have the classic, everybody just sits around until you make a decision. For the most part, this falls into that camp. There are ways that you do have some more, I have to actually time things components tied in, but you do have this is this character's turn, you're going to see who goes when, off to the side, for your characters as well as the enemies that you're up against. So you do have to figure out when you're going to go and who's going to do what. And the characters themselves individually have their own strengths. It goes beyond just the typical RPG, this is the mage, this is the fast character, this is the tank. While there are pieces of that mixed into the equation, I also think that they did a lot of their own unique things with the characters. For example, the character Mael's turn. And Mael is one of my favorites when it comes to what makes her unique, in that she has different stances, and depending on which stance she's in, certain skills that she's going to use are going to do more or are going to set you up to be in another stance that the next time it's her turn will make for a higher damage amount if you play the cards right. You also can bounce off of, for example, one of her skills might be better if something is burning, so you might want to use a fire spell with another character so that when it's Mael's turn, you will then use something else that puts her into a stance that's going to do more damage when it's her turn again. So you can already see how the strategizing plays out, which is perfect within turn-based games, but there is the factor of how can this feel a little bit exciting and engaging, more so than a typical turn-based game where you can sit, go run and get groceries, pick up your dinner, come home, and everybody's still standing around doing the exact same thing. So whenever it is an enemy's turn, the enemies have different moves that they can do that you can either choose to try and parry or dodge. And the further into the game you get, there are additional components that you can react to in certain ways. I don't want to say too much because this is the first impressions and I don't want to give away everything about the combat system, but it does continue to build and get harder and harder. When I first started the game and the enemies are attacking, I felt like I had no idea the timing of things. I immediately thought, I don't know when this thing is going to hit me, and I was just getting constantly hit, and it was embarrassing. But you feel like they don't have the indicators the way you're accustomed to, and it dawned on me that we're so used to so many Souls-like games that there is a certain learning curve to this one, because you do have to kind of assess each individual enemy, because it's not like every enemy is going to come at you in the same way or that they have the same patterns. And even from one move to the next, some of their moves are going to be faster, some of them are going to be slower. And you also, I think, can use the sound effects to give you indications of what's going to work, but not always. And so you're always kind of on the edge of your seat. And if you do not get decent at dodging and parrying, you are going to be punished. Then your strategy is revolving around constantly trying to heal your characters, and the game is very much withholding any kind of resurrection type of item and spell, and if your characters aren't prepared for that, you're going to die pretty quickly. So the combat has a fantastic mix of strategy and reaction and a great learning curve where Once you start to get used to certain enemies, you're going to enter a new area, new enemies are going to emerge, they're going to do different attacks, and you got to learn all of theirs now. And what is additionally, I think, fantastic is that if you are somebody who you're just in it for the story, you don't really want to deal with the challenge of it all, there are different settings, so you can up the setting if you want it to be more difficult, or you can back off a little bit if you want it to be easier. And I know that's something a lot of people really appreciate, especially when it comes to really story-heavy games like this one. Speaking of the story, this has been one of the most unique, interesting, intriguing, and I don't know what's going on type of stories I've come across in a long time. There are a lot of games that I pick up where the story is present, but it's either pretty straightforward or it's very much baked into the item descriptions or cutscenes that you don't really know what they mean in that moment. You don't really know what they mean until you get further context later, and then you have to do these deep dives just to understand what's even going on. So you have those two extremes. And then of course some stories are so heavy-handed that you are hardly playing a game. You're more so just kind of making a character go from point A to point B so that another cutscene can be triggered. And this game thus far has a fantastic balance where there is a very compelling story. You feel immediately like you want to know more of what's going on. They don't necessarily always tell you everything. You have to pick up bits and pieces and note certain word choices that are used. But then at the same time, the more you start to think, okay, well that happened, so I think perhaps this is what's going on. You start making predictions. Then something else gets thrown into the mix. And then some really unpredictable things will start to happen. Things that are really bold decisions to make within the story. And so far, I've been incredibly impressed. I do think that there are some things about it that are somewhat feeling like sprinkles of a Final Fantasy game. And there's some things about it that feel so high stakes and doom and gloom that it feels like something like Attack on Titan. And then you get really funny moments. That's another thing about the story I was not expecting. You have really funny, silly, charming moments that remind me in some ways of the Spren in something like the Stormlight Archive, which has extreme stakes, interesting lore, but then you have these little creatures that are really funny and quirky and strange, and seeing how the characters interact with them provides for some much needed lightheartedness among all of the depressing things that are going on. And as for the characters themselves, I do think that you are starting to get to know them more so through their behaviors as opposed to just being told this is what this person is like, this is this character's character type. You hear how they talk to each other, you hear when something goes wrong, how one of them tries to navigate the trauma that they have just witnessed versus how somebody else tries to navigate it. You're picking up on bits and pieces of their past through the interactions they have. And this is another thing I want to compliment, which would be the dialogue. I'm not going to go into specifics or spoilers, but there was a line that I felt was one of the best of anything I've come across because it felt so real. It's certainly something that a lot of people probably feel or have said in their lives before. But for some reason in media, whether it be books or TV shows or games or movies, it just feels like nobody ever actually behaves like this. There's a moment where the characters have witnessed something really, really tragic, and one of the characters is just trying to process what's happened. They are sort of sitting in their grief, and another character comes to attempt to comfort them, to talk to them, and the character basically just says no, and they actually say, "Can you just go away, please?" And the desperation in their voice, that desire to just be left alone because you just can't handle somebody else talking to you right now, and you recognize they're just trying to help, but you can't deal with it. And the way that the voice actor brought that to life, all of it was fantastic. And when I say it's not something you typically see, it's because normally that's the opportunity for characters to get to know each other, and they talk, and then they process everything they've gone through together. And this is a character that's like, can you please just leave me alone? I just need to be left alone right now. Nobody ever seems to do that in stories, and I was taken aback. I thought it was incredible. The performances also of the cast have been amazing thus far. The characters, I think, are phenomenal. Even though you are only getting bits and pieces of their stories, I am so in love with all of them. And also, I constantly, since the beginning, can't help but feel like everybody's gonna die. I feel like everybody's gonna die. So the more you get to know them, the more there is this sense of dread that is building because you just want all of them to have some peace and happiness. And you have no idea what's going on. No clue, because it's unlike really anything else that I've come across. And perhaps this is one of the things that by the end of the story, I'm gonna complain about, but I have a feeling that this is just going to be something that I am wowed by the end. Returning back to some more actual playable aspects of the game, I want to talk about navigation and the world itself. I do think that it is not quite an open world game in the same way others are, where you can literally go anywhere. And I think a lot of us have discovered that the appeal of that has sort of gone away in practicality, because when you can go literally anywhere, it often results in games that feel incredibly empty. There's not really a whole lot to do. It's really repetitive, and you're like, okay, maybe something a little more streamlined where I have some sense of movement, but I don't really need to go literally everywhere because I don't know that I need to pick up every single little herb I come across. And this game seems to recognize that. I do think that the way that it is open and the actual navigation itself, while satisfying and serviceable, it is not the kind of game that I genuinely just feel like is fun to move around in. There are some games that I just want to climb up to a highest point and jump off of it because it's fun to glide or fly or whatever you can do in the game. And I wouldn't say this is necessarily that kind of game. There have been a couple times, this is probably my only criticism that I have this far. There's been one time that it was especially bad where a character got stuck. And I tried, because you can switch who is the character that you are controlling as you navigate. You can switch. I tried doing that. They were still stuck. I tried camping. And then when I came out of it, they were still stuck. So then I had to load a previous save. So sometimes the characters get a little bit stuck, and that's not the biggest deal, honestly, as long as it's not a constant thing. And it's really only happened the one time in a way that was really bad. A couple times it's been a little clunky. But otherwise, the navigation is fine. As I said, it's serviceable. But the world itself is so beautiful, and they obviously put so much into the detail of each environment that you go to. And because it's not necessarily you can literally go anywhere, I'm not really bothered by that at all because of the reasons I already noted, and because I do kind of want to get to wherever they're sort of guiding me towards, because I know that what is waiting for me in that area is going to be absolutely stunning and breathtaking. And each new location, I think, wow, this is probably one of the prettiest areas I imagine of the whole game. And then you get to the next area and you think like, oh no, never mind, this is the prettiest area. And you're like, never mind, all of it's great. It's all pretty. All of it looks amazing. All of it's fantastic. And it has a mix of areas that look very gritty and real and dark. And other times there are areas that are bright and vibrant. And it seems like it just has the ability to do it all. And speaking of doing it all, this game, I don't know that I can comfortably describe it as any one genre, meaning that as somebody who loves stories in general, not that I feel it's important to pin down, but I do think it's important to recognize what a story brings to the table. So for example, if you're looking at something that is a classic fantasy RPG, if it fits comfortably within that, people have certain expectations, and then what can exceed those expectations is what you do with the familiar groundwork, where you make changes and where you embrace what has made it so well loved. This game feels like a hybrid of so many things. In some ways, it feels like a horror game. In some ways, it feels like a fantasy. In some, it feels like a post-apocalyptic type of story. And I'm loving the way that it's mixing all those things together, from the aesthetics to the stakes to the tone. I just think it establishes everything in a way that is incredibly well balanced. I love that it feels like its own thing. And as a result of doing so many things so well, and also feeling like it has bits and pieces of all of these things that we love, to me, this game, I think, is really showcasing where gaming could go. We have been kind of stuck. I know last year, a lot of the things that got nominated for Game of the Year, I couldn't really care less because I didn't feel that moved necessarily by anything. I didn't think anything was all that exceptional in the same way that games in the past felt. There wasn't that one game that felt like a spark of this is going to be the next thing like we've gotten in years past. And this game already feels like that to me. And I can't wait to see what else comes out, not just this year, but moving forward, because I don't even mind if this is a new trendsetter and we start to get games that feel like this, that look like this, because I could use more of this. Once I'm finished with this game, I want more like this, and there's nothing like it, and I love that feeling. This brings me to my last point, which is just visually how beautiful this is. I already talked about the environments themselves being beautiful, and I've already talked about so many other aspects of the actual play of the game and the combat of the game, the characters and the story, but just how beautiful it looks was something that was very obvious from the various different trailers that we got for it. I saw the first trailer and thought, I don't want to know too much else. I want to jump into that game because it already has my interest peaked. It's done enough. I don't want to learn too much ahead of time. So then I jumped into it, and right away it looks absolutely gorgeous. But I had it in my mind that it would look gorgeous at certain points, and then other times of the game it would just look kind of basic. I feel a game that sort of looked good in trailers and then really fell flat for a lot of people was something like Forspoken. Even the navigation of Forspoken in some ways looks kind of similar to the navigation of this game, but that game felt so empty and it fell so flat, and this one is exceeding expectations, and that goes for the visuals as well, and the visuals are tied really incredibly to the dialogue as well. I really feel like they've matched those things masterfully. However, just the visuals themselves, it's not just within certain trailers. I feel like during combat, I feel like just from one place to the next, characters just talking to each other at a campfire, anything that is happening in the game looks amazing. It's one of those games where you can pause it at so many different moments and take screenshots, and if you showed somebody that screenshot, you would think, oh, that's probably not from the game itself. That's probably from some kind of cinematic trailer. And the fact that the actual gameplay moments look like cinematic trailers is unbelievably impressive, in my opinion. Overall, this has all the ingredients to make for one of my new favorite games of all time. And I have some games that I cannot wait for. Tides of Annihilation, the new Ghost game, the new Witcher game. There's so many games that I'm excited for. But this one has set the bar so high when it comes to new game releases, and I don't even think that I can hold other games to this one. I don't even think that's fair, because this one is just one of those rare ones that pops up out of nowhere and proves that it's come to play. It's absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to keep going with this. I can't wait to see what the studio puts out next. I'm head over heels in love with this game. If you have checked this out, I would love to know your thoughts thus far. I would love to know if there's anything I didn't touch on that you feel like deserves some attention and some highlights. Feel free to go on about that. And if you have criticisms of the game, I'd be interested to see what you aren't really clicking with. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.